Today, we're diving deep into the very foundations of Christianity to talk about a man who was, well, a paradox. He was a brilliant architect of the faith and, to some, its most dangerous heretic. This is the incredible story of Origen of Alexandria.
Think about it for a second. In the 3rd century AD, there wasn't a single unified rulebook for Christian belief. It was all still being figured out, debated, and fought over. It was messy. And this chaotic, creative environment was the perfect place for a mind like Origen's to really take off.
And that's the real kicker, isn't it? How can one of the most important thinkers in the early church, a guy who helped shape its core doctrines, also be the one who gets condemned for those very same ideas? It's a puzzle, and it's absolutely fascinating.
So, to understand Origen's radical ideas, you first have to understand where he came from. He grew up in Alexandria, which was basically the New York City of the ancient world, a huge, bustling melting pot of cultures, religions, and philosophies. His mind was a direct product of that vibrant place.
You see, he had two incredibly powerful forces shaping him. From his father, a philosopher, he got this world-class education in logic, critical thinking, and classical philosophy. But at the exact same time, his mother raised him in a deeply, deeply devout Christian faith. This combo created something totally new, an intellect that wasn't afraid to use the tools of philosophy to unlock the mysteries of theology.
So his whole life was this constant journey of discovery. He starts out in that intellectual hotspot, Alexandria. Then he's drawn to Rome to study philosophy at the highest level. And this path eventually leads him to become a bishop, a major position of influence. His entire life was just this relentless chase for knowledge, both earthly and divine.
Okay, so let's get to the good stuff. How did this unique background actually influence his work? We're going to zero in on 3 of his most important contributions, ideas that would seriously shape the future of Christian belief for centuries to come.
First up, the Trinity. Now, he didn't invent the idea out of thin air, but Origen was one of the very first to build a really sophisticated, complex framework to understand it. He argued that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit were all distinct from each other, but they were also, somehow, part of one single divine being. That probably sounds pretty familiar to us now, but back then, this was totally groundbreaking stuff. He was laying the intellectual foundation for what would become a central pillar of Christianity.
Next, he went after the big one. How are people saved? This area of study is called soteriology. And Origen's take was, well, it wasn't simple. He didn't see it as just a one-and-done kind of thing.
For Origen, salvation was like a partnership. It wasn't enough to just believe. Sure, that was the crucial first step, the foundation, but that faith had to be paired with real moral effort. You had to actively participate by living a good life. This was a huge deal. It meant your choices, your day-to-day actions, they all mattered deeply on your spiritual journey. You weren't just a passive bystander, you were an active partner with God.
And finally, there were his ideas about the Holy Spirit, what theologians call pneumatology. For Origen, the Spirit wasn't some distant, abstract power. No way. He saw it as an active, personal guide, working in history and in the lives of everyday people. The implication here was just profound. Divine guidance wasn't just something for the old prophets. It was a living, breathing reality, available to everyone right now to help them grow.
So, you've got the Trinity, salvation through both faith and works, an active Holy Spirit. These ideas sound pretty foundational today, right? But in his time, they were radical. And that is where the trouble really started.
This became the million-dollar question about Origen. Was he a genius, a pioneer, pushing Christianity into the future? Or was he a dangerous heretic, leading people astray with all these philosophical ideas that could contaminate the pure, simple faith? The early church was completely split on this.
And the voices against him got louder and louder. Critics, like the super-influential Bishop Eusebius of Nicomedia, they basically said that Origen's whole philosophical method was a corruption. For them, trying to explain Christian mysteries with pagan philosophy was like mixing poison with drinking water. They were terrified it would lead believers away from simple faith and into endless, dangerous speculation, threatening the unity of a church that was still pretty fragile.
So, what was the final verdict? What did history decide? The truth is, there isn't one. On the one hand, you have this foundational thinker whose work on the Trinity and salvation became absolutely essential. But on the other hand, you have a guy whose more out-there ideas were officially condemned by church councils centuries after he died. He's both. He exists in both of these spaces at the same time.
So what are we supposed to take away from a story like this? Origen's legacy is still completely unsettled. And you know what? Maybe that's the whole point.
Perhaps his real, lasting gift wasn't a checklist of correct beliefs. Maybe it was his method. It was his absolutely fearless example of using every single intellectual tool he had, philosophy, logic, reason, to explore the deepest questions of faith. He proved that faith didn't have to be afraid of asking the hard questions.
And that really leaves us with this final thought. Origen's life forces all of us to ask what any belief system, any philosophy really, needs to survive and grow. Is it the comfort of absolute certainty and a rigid set of rules? Or is it the engine of relentless curiosity, the kind that dares to peek into the unknown? Origen shows curiosity. And for that, he was both celebrated and condemned, a legacy that still challenges every single one of us today.